Listen, firstly, welcome to the West Coast. I hope you're enjoying the sunshine and a great place to be. Awesome to be here with Maureen Pugh, MP from the West Coast, and representing National so well in this community. Obviously, you've seen the OCR. It's obvious that we're going to have interest rates staying higher for longer. And again, that is a function of a government that has spent so much, that has driven inflation higher, that has then kept interest rates up higher. It's the families that I'm thinking of that are having to move from refixing their loans from 2.5% up to almost 7%, having to find an extra $750 a fortnight, worried about how they actually pay their bills and actually how they keep their house as a result. And that is a function of just two people to blame, Chris Hipkins and Grant Robertson, for economic mismanagement, government spending out of control, inflation up through the roof, and interest rates higher for longer. With that, happy to take any questions. Disagree strongly. Our tax plan is actually fully funded, and as you've seen, the advice from the Treasury is that tax relief is a much better way than actually government spending. It's less inflationary. The second thing I'd say is our fiscal plan actually has government spending at about $3.5 billion less than this government. The third thing I'd say, and you've seen the Westpac report probably from today as well, saying that the fiscal risk actually sits with the Labour government, particularly in a coalition arrangement with Te Pāti Māori and the Greens, which will be a higher spending track and more fiscal risk sitting there. That is the reality of it. We are here because this government has not been able to control government spending. And I just put it to you, every morning Chris Hipkins wakes up grumpy and negative and tacky, banging on about how our numbers don't add up. Well, actually, Labour's numbers have never added up every year for 6 years in a row. So the fiscal risk sits with this Labour government. They have not been able to manage the economy well. Our tax plan and our spending track is a much less inflationary environment.
Are you actually saying you know more than Goldman Sachs?
Sorry?
Are you saying you know more than Goldman Sachs?
I'm just giving you a view. I'm just giving you our view, which is that our tax plan is fully funded. The advice from Treasury is very clearly that tax relief is less inflationary than actually government spending. And then, as I said, if you look in the context of our fiscal plan, $3.5 billion less spending than what the government has proposed, and also a government, frankly, that has never been able to deliver its fiscal track or its commitments either, says to me that that is a much more inflationary, higher risk environment, and that's been confirmed by Westpac today, saying, yes, the fiscal risk sits with Labour getting into government again. Our commitment is 6.5% cuts out of our public service so that we can move those resources, as we've talked before, from the front line, from the back office to the front line, and actually give tax relief to low and middle income New Zealanders. Our commitment is 6.5%. Our commitment is 6.5%, and that's what we'll look to do.
6.5 is low, 6.5.
Sorry?
Is your commitment 6.5 or less, or 6.5 or more?
6.5 exactly is what we want on average across the agencies, because that is exactly what's needed to be delivered so that we can fully fund our tax plan, but importantly also we can recycle cash from the back office to the front line. Sorry? Look, in the context of $595 million a year, in the context of a government spending $137 billion and an extra $1 billion each and every week, it's quite an achievable thing. When we look at a 62% increase in government department spends on those core 24 agencies that we want to target, that's quite a reasonable and quite an achievable target. No, 6.5% is what we are going to deliver out of that savings. We think that's appropriate. We think that's balanced. We think that moves the focus from the back office to the front line, and we think those savings can be generated and delivered to low and middle income New Zealanders who deserve tax relief in a high cost environment. Again, we are seeing interest rates staying higher for longer, and I just want you to think about tonight that there are New Zealanders over the next 3, 6 and 9 months that are refixing their mortgages, and they're moving from 2.5, 2.9% rates up to 6.5, 6.9, 7% rates, and they're having to magic up $750 a fortnight. And how on earth are they supposed to do that? And the kind of sacrifices that we see parents and families making in order to deliver that, that is serious, because they are at risk of losing their homes. We see almost 20,000 people now in default on their mortgages. We see 423,000, I think it is, now behind on with debt arrears. So, that is the reality for New Zealanders. 1 in 2 of us are now worried about money on a daily basis. This is serious stuff, and it's economic mismanagement, cumulative economic mismanagement over the last 6 years has led us here. Correct, it's on top of the 2%. Well, we're talking 6.5% on top of what Labor has already committed to do, which is 2% from memory.
The issue that Goldman Sachs raised...
Sorry, go Thomas. Yep.
The issue that Goldman Sachs raised in their piece is not that your tax cuts would be unaffordable and you have debt funds on them that would be inflationary that way. The issue that they raised is that the tax cuts would work the way that you said they would do it, but that they would be inflationary because they would take foreign money, cloud into the housing market and stimulate the wealth effect of rising house prices. That's what they were concerned about in terms of the big inflation on it.
And I don't buy that argument, because essentially house pricing will be determined by supply in the market, supply in the home ownership market, supply in the private rental market, supply in the social housing, public housing market. And so that's what will determine ultimately house prices. As I've said before, we've got a fully funded tax plan. We're not borrowing for it. We're cutting it out of wasteful government spending. And as you've seen, the Treasury advice says very clearly, tax relief in the way that we have proposed is less inflationary than wasteful government spending.
Because if house prices are low or fall, then you won't be able to sell any houses above the threshold.
We are, as you know, there are multiple sources of reprioritised savings out of government spending. There is multiple sources of revenue being raised. We have built buffers into our tax plan to the tune of $500 million in the first year. We collect more revenue than we actually spend. You can look at our fiscal track and our fiscal plan as well, where we've put in $10 billion worth of operating allowances and unallocated, and we've got $8 billion worth of capital allowances unallocated over that period of time. We have built buffers and flexibility into all our plans, and that's because we are prudent, responsible, good economic managers. And I'm telling you, for New Zealanders thinking about this election, they are sitting there tonight worried again that interest rates are staying higher for longer. And that is serious stuff, because that is actually a huge amount of pain and suffering on New Zealand families that didn't need to have this if this government had made adjustments 2 years ago, as many of us here were talking about. Well, they should do, absolutely. And I think, we have thought very deeply about the commitments. We've had 40 policies since over the course of this year. And what I'd say to you is we've been very prudent and very responsible about how we fund them and how we can actually deliver them. And I'd like to think we'd make promises that we keep and that we actually work really hard to do that. Well, I want to deliver more housing across New Zealand, and the housing market, again, is shaped and it's very linked. There's an ecosystem here that first of all, we've got to get the home ownership market expanded, and the supply of houses being built needs to increase, and there's some things that we've talked about how we can actually get more housing growth happening. We need to get the private rental market working again, which is why we will unwind the Bright Line test and interest deductibility, because we need more supply of houses and rental, and we need to build more social and state housing. Yes. Well, there's going to be new housing across the country, as we've talked about. We're going to maintain the budget commitment laid out by the government in May of this year. We have that. We're on that track. We want to do a full review of Kāinga Ora in particular, because we don't think it's a high-performing organisation, and we want to understand before we give them more money beyond the cycle that we've funded, that we actually have got a good organisation that can procure and manage those assets well. We also want to power up our community housing providers. There's a huge opportunity for us to do that, and there'll be good community housing providers here on the coast, as there is around the country. Well, what we're going to deliver is lower inflation so that we can reduce the cost of living for people. And whether you're on the West Coast or whether you're in Southland or we're in Hawke's Bay, that's what is the number one issue in this election. Well, we need to continue to maintain roads. As we've talked about, we've got a big program of road investment and maintenance. It's important that we upgrade potholed roads, that actually money has actually been put into investment and maintenance of our roads across the country. We've got 13 roads of national significance, not here on the West Coast, but around the country. We've got 4 major public transport projects that we want to fund. We have a major infrastructure deficit across the country, and we're going to turbocharge that and accelerate that. Well, let's be very clear here. On the West Coast, the most powerful sector is the agriculture sector, the primary industry sector, the farming sector. And that is a sector that I've understood well here. I've come here and met with them before in the farming sector. And what they want is us to unleash them, because they are burdened with huge amounts of over-regulation, red tape that actually creates huge costs but no real benefit. There have been 20 different regulatory and legislative changes over 6 years under this government that has actually burdened our farmers with a huge administrative of workload. Many of the farmers on the West Coast here will tell me they spend up to 30% of their week filling in paperwork and providing information to government departments, not farming. And so we want to free them up from regulation to get them farming. We want to give them the tools and technology around gene editing and biotechnology. We want to give them credit for all the good stuff that they're doing on farm around that too.
It's lifting the
Sorry, Andrea.
Literally slipping into the sea, and communities are separate for often weeks at a time.
Yeah,
That's growth such as tourism and primary industry.
I agree.
Why is it not? Why do growth of national?
Well, it is important. The way that we'd like to deal with that is that I'd like to sit down with the region and actually do what we call a regional deal. I think that's a model where we get very clear and very specific about what is the critical infrastructure in the region of the West Coast. I spoke to the Mayor about that again this morning in passing when I saw her, to say, right, what is the critical infrastructure we need to invest in? And if that's the case, then we work that program through and we prioritise Waka Kotahi and their work into this region, and also we work out how we fund it between central and local government to do it as well.
It's lifting.
Sorry?
You do roads and regions.
Well, we've announced 13 roads of what we call national significance, but clearly they are big backbone investments that need to get done because they power up productivity in a regional economy. And Andrea's right. This is a region that has suffered with roading, and it's a low density population over a very large area. But we need to sit down with the councils and the local community here and actually work out what are the priorities and actually work our way through them and invest in them.
It's lifting them.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yesterday the numbers are lower than what they were in 2020. Is that a signal that people either have made up their mind or that they're just switched off?
Oh, look, I think it's just one day, and I think also you have to understand with the COVID election last year, I think there was a slightly different set of dynamics as well. But look, last election was 67% advance voting in that 2-week period, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if it gets close to that again. It may not be as high, I think, in the context of a COVID election where people were uncertain about what could be announced or what could happen at any point in time. But what is clear to me is people, there is a mood for change, and so people are out there voting, and I'll encourage them to do that.
It's lifting the pension.
For not sending out easy vote packs to everyone. I think about 1 million easy vote packs have yet to be delivered.
Yeah, that's not good. I used my easy vote on Monday when I went off to vote, and it was very seamless actually, just to take the bottom tier off and away you go. So it's disappointing that hasn't happened.
Some voters are confused about the fact that they are not aware that they do not need an easy vote.
Yes, I had that this morning where someone came up to me and said, I haven't received my paper to go off and do the advance voting, and I said to them, you don't necessarily need it, but it is disappointing that it's not set to go across the whole country. Yep.
Is lifting the pension age your bottom line for national, or is that an area that you're willing to budge on?
Well, look, I just want to be clear with our commitments to seniors, because there has been a lot of misinformation from Labor about that. We are going to increase superannuation payments each and every year. We are going to link it to average after-tax income. Because of the way that our tax plan works, that means that actually superannuation couples would get an extra $26 a fortnight, $17 a fortnight for a single superannuitant. Equally, we're going to keep the winter energy payment. We think it's a good program, and we're going to keep that and maintain that. And then, yes, what we have said is from 2044, if you're born after 1979, over a 2-year period, we will move the retirement age from 65 to 67. Why? Because every decade, New Zealanders live about a year and a half longer. We want to make sure the system maintains its universality and as a universal system that we can fund and appropriately fund. And I think that's a sensible, pragmatic, right thing to do over time, and give people lots of advance notice that it's coming.
Do you think you can change Winston Peters' position on superannuation?
Well, I'm not interested in working with Winston Peters.
The last 2 major polls have suggested that.
Yeah, and that's why my message to New Zealanders is really demonstrating exactly what the polls are saying. This will be a very close election, and the power sits with the New Zealand people, not with any political party, but for them to actually step up to the plate and actually deliver and vote for the change that they want to see happen. If they think this country's heading in the wrong direction, then my ask is do not vote for any other political party other than the National Party.
But if push comes to shove after the election, you need Winston Peters to form a government. Are you willing to budge on the pension age? Would you keep it the same?
Again, hypothetical question, because I don't intend.
People should know that.
I don't intend working with Winston Peters. I'm only going to pick up the phone as a last resort in the event to avoid having a Labour Te Pāti Māori Greens government for the next 3 years. I cannot guarantee that we can even work with him, because he hasn't come with the National Party for 27 years, and we all remember 2017. So I've only said I'll pick up the phone as a last resort, but my challenge back to New Zealanders is the power sits with you. This is about people power, it's about an election, it's a tremendous responsibility, a great privilege to have an ability to vote, exercise that vote with caution, because this is a serious time for this country. We need to get it turned around, and as a result, I'm encouraging people to party vote National. Sorry.
What did you make of Labor's policy of fair pay for Defence Force personnel?
Look, I haven't had a chance to go through it, but I'm happy to look at that in government.
Is that something you would support?
I want to look at it in government, and I have a lot of openness for it.
So just to go back to that, sorry, are you adamant that if...
Sorry, I'll just come back to... Sorry.
Are you adamant that if National is elected in just over a week's time, the pension age will be lifting? That's happening?
That's our policy, correct.
If you become the Prime Minister, will you approve the Waitaha hydro scheme?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a statutory process that would need to be followed and to go through, but I have great sympathy for us expanding renewable sources of electricity across New Zealand. As I've said, we need to double the amount of renewable electricity in a short period of time so that we can make the transition off fossil fuels into clean electricity. Again, I have huge sympathy for the coast here and actually in wanting to embrace renewable electricity as well. So big picture, I like the direction of travel, but ultimately that is a decision that actually has to be made through a statutory process, and we should let that run through.
So you'd look at it, you'd re-look at it?
Well, again, it's not I'm supportive of increasing renewable energy across this country, including here on the West Coast. We have abundant sources of geothermal, solar, wind and hydro, but again, this is an issue that has a statutory process to flow through. Department of Conservation, is it Minister of Conservation?
David Harper will stop.
Yeah.
It would affect the pristine wilderness area. But look at a picture of it, and it doesn't really, it's just weird.
No, I'm aware of the story. I'm aware of the images and the location and the project, and I'm very supportive of it. But I'd want to make sure it follows a proper statutory process.
The reason I ask is because when you went to Westland Milk this morning, the chief executive there says we can't decarbonise without this scheme because you've got to put in new lines that come from the east coast.
Yep.
They need this to decarbonise. They're relying on coal at the moment, and if they want to decarbonise, they need this scheme.
Yeah, and that's why I'm very supportive of the project, but in terms of its detail, it has to go through a statutory process. I need to respect that, but you should read very clearly between the lines that we want to double the amount of renewable electricity up and down this country. We want to make it easier to do that. That's why we've said we'll have consenting for any renewable electricity project within 1 year. We'll make sure that and it lasts for 35 years, that consent. We make sure that actually any investment in transmission and local power lines actually can be done without a resource consent. Yeah.
Some people on the coast think that the slow glacial progress of that is slowing up regional economic development. Would you endeavour to restart that process, get it moving, put a rocket under dock to...
Yeah, I really do want to look at that. I mean, my message in broad terms is that on the West Coast here, it's unique to New Zealand in the sense of 84% of the land is actually held up in the dock estate. And, let's be clear, a lot of the dock estate is of variable quality. There is national parks of pristine land and wonderful natural resources and assets that we need to protect, obviously. But, we should be looking and be up for looking at mining on a case-by-case basis. Some of the practices here on the coast are genuinely world-class in terms of environmental restoration post-mining, but we want to do that on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. That's something I will be open to looking at and we will explore in government. Yep.
Just on Chris Bishop, why was he lying on Twitter yesterday about Grant Robertson not putting his hand up to debate?
Well, we haven't had a formal appeal to say I want to, for us to debate Grant Robertson. And what I'd say to you is it's a leaders' debate, and Grant Robertson may like to be the leader of the Labour Party, but he's not. Last time I checked, he was their number 4, and so that doesn't feel like a good proposition anyway.
Did you say no to that?
No, it was never formally presented to us.
Okay, so it was presented to the press, but it wasn't presented to you?
It hasn't been formally presented to us or our team.
Winston Peters suggested on Q&A...
Sorry, I'll just come to Mikey and then come back. Look, our focus has been on the issues that matter to New Zealanders. It's about cost of living, it's about law and order, it's been about health and education. Those are the big issues. I've said before, we would love to get to a commitment where we would be able to go to 2% of GDP on defence spending, but that is a long way off by virtue of the state of our books and our financial and fiscal position. Again, it's not something that we can. It's not a priority given all the other pressures that we've got economically on us fiscally. It's an intent, but not actually something that we can actually work our way through until we see the books. Our focus has been on providing policy around other areas because we think that's what New Zealanders care deeply about. Of course, in government, we'll make sure that we continue thinking about how we can add value to our partners and our relationships through our defence commitments and our contributions. But right now, our priority is to actually fix this economy so that we actually have the cash to strengthen our public services. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Let's try to finish my. Sorry. Oh, it worries me tremendously, and we want to see peace and prosperity in our region, and we want New Zealand to be able to play its role along with our partners and our allies and to make contributions, valuable contributions in a defence set. All I'm just being is very pragmatic and saying to you, priority, our number one priority is to fix the economy. If we can't do that, we don't have the cash to actually invest in the defence forces, we don't have the cash to invest in law and order, we don't have the cash to invest in the public services that we desperately want to see enhanced in this country.
Winston Peters suggested or made a comment during his interview with Jack Tame in Q&A that he had asked for the spreadsheets behind your tax cut plan. Has he actually made a formal request, or is that just a throwaway comment?
Never heard from him. No, never heard from him. And as I said, my preference is not to work with Winston Peters and New Zealand First. It's only as a last resort I'll pick up the phone in order to avoid 3 years of what I think would be a chaotic government and take New Zealand backwards. It would have been on the margins of different events that we've been, whether it's been field days, ethnic events, and on the back of a Business New Zealand event earlier in the year back in February.
But just small talk, like we haven't had a detailed conversation.
No, just getting to know him on the margins of other events.
The editor of the press says that
Sorry?
the editor of the press says that National was asked if Luxon would debate Robertson to avoid the need to reschedule the event. Is that right?
We haven't had a formal request.
So there's no formal request?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
So why is the editor of the press saying that?
I don't know, but I just say it's called a leaders' debate, and I wouldn't have thought that was a great idea anyway, because, as I said, Grant Robertson isn't the leader of the Labour Party. He may wish to be so, but he's not. He's their number 4.
A couple of weeks ago, Chris Bishop was asked about whether there would be job losses at Greymouth if National gets in. He said, hope so. Do you hope people will lose their jobs in the national government? Was that an insensitive comment to make?
Well, I'm not going out there to deliberately want people to lose their jobs, but what we need is a much more efficient public service, and what we have had in New Zealand is a public service that has added 14,000 more public servants and has yet failed to deliver for the New Zealand people by improving the outcomes that they deliver and that we pay them to do. And so our message very clearly on KO is we think it is an organisation that is not a high-performing organisation. I am very concerned about procurement, I'm concerned about the lack of consultation, I'm concerned about the asset management, and before you put billions and billions of dollars more into state and social housing through KO, I'd really want to do a review to say how effective and how good is that organisation. And so that's what that's about, making sure that we have a good, strong review of KO, so we have confidence that if we're going to put more money in going forward, we know that they can manage that well. And I think that's just good, prudent responsibility. Sorry? At this stage, our focus has been on KO. There have been a number of challenges where there's not good consultation with the community about projects that are coming into towns or communities, and I think there's a better engagement model that's needed from KO. Likewise, we've been very frustrated, as I've said before, about the fact that there's been 10,000 complaints in the last 14 months about unruly behaviour from tenants, and only 3 have been evicted. And frankly, there's rights and responsibilities in this country, and when there's 24,000 other people on a state house wait list, and there are people disrespecting the privilege that they've got of having a state house, frankly, they should be evicted and others should have the chance.
So how is safe?
Sorry?
So housing and urban development is safe, that agency is safe?
Our focus, our primary focus is on KO. That's really where our concerns have been. Yeah, it's hard isn't something that I'm wanting an independent, I'm wanting a detailed review about per se. Clearly, I want better performance from all our public services in New Zealand. I think the New Zealand people are owed that, and I just think we have to. I'm not being political here or ideological. I'm just saying let's take a step back and actually look dispassionately and objectively about what's going on. And the problem is that we have actually added 14,000 more public servants. We've got $2 billion almost of extra consultant and contracting spending going on, and actually we've got worse outcomes, whether it's education, health, infrastructure, roading, law and order. And so we have to deliver better outcomes, and that's why I want better public service targets, crystal clear across all agencies, so everybody in that organisation knows what they're there to do and what they're there to achieve.
You've said that families will get $252 a fortnight under the family's tax package. What do you think the
Families on, yes, family boost.
How many families exactly will get
Well, there's, what we've got is if you're on an average household income and you actually have young children that are in early childhood, the combination of actually our indexation of tax brackets as well as also family boost packages means that we can generate up to $250 a fortnight.
How many families, though, do you know, have like an exact number?
Well, if I just take the family boost component of it, 130,000 families will benefit from actually having tax credits available for application to early childhood education that they might have costs there, or likewise they might choose to put it into their mortgage payments or rent payments as well.
That full package, though, who's getting, how many families will get to 200?
I can't remember exactly the full number. I can come back to you afterwards and get back to you.
Got a number, though?
Yes, I have got a number for it, yes.
The National Party's attitude towards prudent spending.
Yes.
How much can you really deliver for New Zealanders on this number before you grant?
Well, I want to be really clear because I think this is not understood in Wellington, and my observation from coming from outside of politics and looking at government is that government, and Chris Hipkins in particular, measures success by how much money is being spent. And as a former CEO, where you actually have the same number of resources, even less money, you get different outcomes by virtue of how you use that money and how you deploy it and how you manage those resources.
How tight is it? Can you deliver for everyone?
Well, as I've said, we're actually going to have, we have a slightly less spending in the first 4 years of our fiscal plan. We're going to have less tax, and we're going to have much more focus on and less debt.
So is there room in your budget for a regional voting plan for the likes of the West Coast?
Yes, we've built in unallocated. We've got unallocated operating allowances of up to $10 billion. We've got unallocated operating capital allowances of up to $8 billion. But really, again, a lot of it is actually understanding there are whole funding and financing tools, for example, that we don't use with the purposes of New Zealand infrastructure development, which many other small advanced economies around the world do use. We haven't opened up long-term debt funding. We haven't opened up public-private partnerships. We haven't opened up toll roads. We haven't opened up value capture, things that actually enable us to actually build and pull that infrastructure investment forward and to be able to do it in a much quicker way to get the benefit and the productivity benefits for regional economies that if we just leave it to government to fund it all. So, it's a comprehensive, different way of thinking and delivering outcomes through doing things differently, and that's what we have to do and get better, make that money work harder to get better outcomes.
Last question.
More and more Labour MPs come out in favour of a wealth tax.
Yeah.
Do you think that is evidence that Hipkins is going to be rolled?
I think that is, you're seeing very clearly from the Labour Party caucus, you've had 3 MPs, I think, come out over the last 24 hours, or candidates. You've had Grant Robertson and David Parker feel very strongly about a wealth tax as well and throw their toys out of the cot. You've got Te Pāti Māori and the Greens who are very adamant about a wealth tax. And so, there is no doubt Chris Hipkins on the other side, if he was successful, is going to be leveraged into delivering a wealth tax. And I think that's bad for New Zealand. I think it puts a wrecking ball through the economy. And it's not what we need to do, is tax our way out of a low growth environment at the moment. I think it would put a lot of pressure on, I would say, because I can't see how Chris Hipkins, he is literally saying he's not doing a wealth tax, but he's also the same individual that said they wouldn't extend the Bright Line test, they wouldn't increase fuel tax, and they end up doing that. Sorry, yes. Yeah. Well, it was quite concerning to see that report that was suggesting from Retail New Zealand that most retailers felt that they'd been impacted by crime in some form or another. Again, it gets back to sending a message from the top that we are actually tough on crime, and it's not just a platitude. It's not just a cliche or a slogan. It's actually making sure we've got the detail and the plans to do it, and we do. We're going to have serious consequences for serious young offenders. We're going to make sure there is stronger sentencing. We are going to make sure we tackle gangs, and we give police more measures and more support and more tools. And so it's the combination of all of that that actually will send the message that I'm sorry, because you've only got to go around, and some of you have been with me, but you go sit with those employees that are coming to work today to work in retail shopping malls, who've been victims of ram raids or aggressive crime and theft, and I can think of many examples that I've spoken to over the last year. And why are they not feeling safe in their workplace? Why do they not deserve to feel safe in that way? So we do need to get serious about law and order in this country, because we either just let it get worse and worse and worse every 6 months, and I think we get to choose and do something about that.
Have you thought of justification for the way that benefit rates are calculated for sole parents and people on disability benefit? Why are you changing those rates? What's the justification?
Well, as you know, the most important thing is to make sure people's purchasing power, beneficiaries' purchasing power, remains intact. The best way to do that is to make sure that that is indexed to inflation, to the cost of living, and the better opportunity is to get people who can work off welfare and into work, and that's been an abject failure from the government. I think that's been an absolute disgrace. That at a time of 3.2 and 3.6% unemployment rates, worker shortages in every region, in every sector, there are 60,000 more people on unemployment benefit. That is insane, absolutely insane.
And what people who can't work, those
And
people
that's-
with permanent disability, why do their rates go down too?
Well, they don't go down. It's wrong to mischaracterise it as that, because every year there will be an increase in benefits. That'll be in the tune of adjusting for inflation and the cost of living. That means that their costs are covered and that their purchasing power is protected. Well, it's been insane. The policy up until the policy up to 2020 or 2019 has been actually to link it to inflation. I think that's the right thing to do. The government then linked it to average. The government linked it to average wages, and then in a high inflation environment for the last 3 years to send it back to inflation.
Is it a disincentive? Is that the point of it? You want less people on the benefit, so you're going to make sure that they're worse off?
No, I want people on the benefit to have their costs covered each and every year, and to know that their money is going to buy what it needs to buy to cover their costs. And so that's why we're indexing it to inflation, and that is the right way to think about it.
But your policy effectively makes them worse off and will make them worse off in the future.
No, I disagree. They're going to be no worse off. They are actually going to have inflation-adjusted cost of living adjustments each and every year.
To be no worse off, that would mean inflation would have to increase faster than wages, right? In order for them to be no worse off in the future than under the current policy.
But let's be clear what's happened with the current policy. You had a government that moved it from off inflation to actually indexing it to after average tax incomes, and then actually moved it straight back to inflation again. Because the reality is, for the last 3 years we've been going backwards. 6% inflation, 4% wage growth. So the better long-term solution is to say, righto, if you're on a benefit, we care about you. We want to make sure that you get a good increase in your benefits each and every year. That makes sure that it covers your costs, that it's inflation adjusted, and it's a cost of living adjustment. For everyone else then, the 180,000 almost that are on unemployment benefit, we have to work much harder at getting them off welfare and not just saying you languish there for the rest of your life, because that is not a good place to be.
Sorry, last one, we have to go.
Sorry? Sorry, mate.
Sorry, Chris, just
good to see you, mate.
First question, specifically about no new mining on conservation land. Is that policy gone?
We will do it on a case-by-case basis, and we'll look at each of the merits of the cases, because there is really, if you think about it, for example, we just talked about road maintenance. It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense to be shifting gravel from other parts of the country on roads to bring them here. If we can do that sort of thing, that's great. There are other exploration, other mining activity that is quite possible to do. There's very good environmental protection and restoration work. As I've seen, it's some of the best in the world, I think, happens here. So we will look at it on a case-by-case basis.
And secondly, the Waitaha Power Scheme is not just about decarbonisation, it's about resilience for the
Correct.
West Coast.
Energy security.
AFA or whatever. Will that play a part in that discussion?
Well, I think that's right. I think the way you're framing energy, it's about energy security as much as just about renewable energy per se. And as I said before, I'm very open to the project, but again, there's a statutory process that we need to follow in government. But I am determined that we are going to double the amount of renewable electricity across this country, and I think that's important.
But it's about resilience. Because
Correct.
We've only got 4 power lines, 4 cables bringing power into the West Coast. On an
Yes.
AFA, we have no power.
Yes.
So
No, fully understand.
that
Will be a consideration. Yep. Great. All right. Can I say thank you so much, team? Thank you for coming up to Greymouth with us, and enjoy the rest of the sunny weather. See ya.